Hello to anyone who is joining us either in real time or, well, it wouldn't be in real time, would it? Because I'm not broadcasting this. Never mind. Anyone who's joining us after the fact for this Bible study today. If you were looking for a recording from last week, there was none because technical difficulties made us jump ship after just a few minutes. It was making everybody crazy. It was my Wi-Fi. So sorry about that, but you missed nothing. So here we are today as we push on with Genesis and with the Rebecca and Isaac story. So hopefully this will be kind of a fun conversation today. All right. And let us begin with prayer. And today's prayer comes from Bishop Dion Johnson, who is the Episcopal Bishop of Missouri. And I don't think he posts a prayer every day, but many days. And they are often just spot on for me personally, what's going on in my head and heart. So as we watch the news, as we hold Lebanon and Israel in our prayers, and Palestine, the Palestinian people, not to mention our own country. Let us hear these words. Let us pray. Holy God, who out of chaos called forth creation, and who out of despair brings forth delight. In the uncertainty before us, in the unknown unfolding around us, immerse us in your scandalous hope, that we might be grounded in your all-embracing love. Amen.
Amen.
That phrase, scandalous hope, really got my attention. That's what I'm turning around in my brain today. So I offer that to you. All right, so it's time to do a where in the world. It's not a where in the world is the Tuppers. It's where in the world is Isaac. And I thought we would start by taking a look at the end. So we are in Genesis 24. We're going to review what we read last week because we didn't really get to talk about it. But I wanted to back up to the very end of Genesis 23, which we talked about a couple weeks ago, and maybe 3 weeks ago now, and had an interesting conversation about the importance of place and property and ownership. And this is just to locate Abraham. So at the end of Genesis 23, so the field of Ephron in Machpelah, which was to the east of Mamre, the field with the cave that was in it and all the trees that were in the field throughout its whole area, passed to Abraham as a possession in the presence of the Hittites, in the presence of all who went in at the gate of his city. After this, Abraham buried Sarah, his wife, in the cave of the field of Machpelah, facing Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. The field and the cave that is in it passed from the Hittites into Abraham's possession as a burying place. And that's the last we have seen of Abraham. Today, I think we'll probably move forward and see a little bit more of him, but that's the last we've seen of him in our conversations. And then last week, we were talking about the moment when Isaac finally meets Rebecca after Eliezer, Abraham's servant, has identified her at the well. And Genesis says, now Isaac had come from Beer Lahai Roi and was settled in the Negeb. So we see where Abraham is, we see where Isaac is. And let's just look at a map. Hebron's up here. And here's Bir Lahai Roy-ish. You see the question mark. We know it. Oh, Joey, it's a squirrel. You've seen squirrels before. Sorry, he's losing his mind. But you see, clearly Abraham and Isaac are not together. Does anyone remember anything about this place named Bir Lahai Roy? Does it seem?
Isn't that where Hagar went with her son?
Yes.
Well done.
Very well done. Gold star to Mr. Reese. Yes. So in Genesis 16, the angel of the Lord found her, Hagar, by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? She said, I'm running away from my mistress Sarai. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her. The angel of the Lord also said to her, I will so greatly multiply your offspring that they cannot be counted for multitude. And the angel of the Lord said to her, now you have conceived and shall bear a son. You shall call him Ishmael, for the Lord has given heed to your affliction. He shall be a wild ass of a man with his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And he shall live at odds with all his kin. So she, Hagar, named the Lord who spoke to her, you are El Roi. For she said, have I really seen God and remained alive after seeing him? Therefore the well was called Bir Lahai Roi. It lies between Kadesh and Bered. So as John reminded us, Bir Lahai Roi, where Isaac's been hanging out, is the place where his
Hello?
I'm thinking what her relationship would be. The place where,
Stepbrother.
well, yeah, stepmother-ish, um, the mother of his stepbrother, or his half-brother, rather, um, encountered God. So Isaac's been hanging out down here. Oh, we just lost Ellie. I hope she can come back. Um, so what do you make of that?
Must be some connection to Bela Hai Roy besides Hagar and Ishmael.
But do you think he's reconnected with them?
It's possible. I just
Looks
think
like
it,
we,
oh, go ahead, John,
I was
sorry.
just going to say, looks like we moved on from Abraham and that we now have got a whole new story that's
Yeah.
starting with a new person.
Yeah, we'll finish up Abraham at the beginning of chapter 25. We see him one more time. Um, hush, hush, hush. Sorry, everybody. Um, it's a squirrel. Okay. Anyway, I find it interesting because clearly it's a vast area, and the fact that that Isaac is in that same area. For me, what's most interesting, I think, is the fact that he is clearly not with his father, right? We can probably understand why. I wouldn't want to have anything to do with my father either if he tried to kill me. Um, so, there's a very practical reason. But as the story goes, whether it literally took place this way or not, the level of the narrative of the story, Isaac winds up down here in the same area where Hagar has seen God,
Maybe he's looking for God.
maybe,
Maybe she's told him the story.
maybe,
Well, he didn't have much to, Isaac didn't have much to do with Hagar.
exactly. If he is hanging out with Ishmael, that's interesting too, because how did he find him? How did he know where Ishmael was? So it may just be coincidental. I'm certainly willing to allow that possibility, as if it's mine to allow, but you know what I mean. Or it could be
Wasn't Isaac good
Patty, what,
buddies? I was gonna say, wasn't Isaac good buddies with Hagar's son?
when they were little, yeah. But
Yeah.
then once Ishmael's been banished, it's not like they're texting, right? So how does he know where he is? Um, John, what were you going to say?
well, I'm trying because we read it last week. And where was Sarah's tent? Is Sarah's tent down here or is it someplace else?
Yeah, good question. Let's go back and look at that. Okay. Um, and well, on that note, um, why don't we read these last couple of paragraphs again so that we can remember? So, we have okay. I'm just trying to see if it sets us at the beginning of chapter 24. Abraham was old, advanced in years, yada, yada, yada. He sends out his servant. I assume, because we don't have any textual clues to the contrary, I assume he's still up in Mamre, in Canaan, in that area, because he's put down his stake with Sarah's tomb, Sarah's burial place. And of course, Canaan is the place which he has been promised. So it's important to him to have that spot. And so then the servant, probably Eleazar, took 10 of his master's camels and went to Aram Naharaim, to the city of Nahor. And Nahor, you may remember, is Abraham's brother. And that's not on this particular map, which would be an interesting thing to find out where that is. And so then they meet at this well. They have this
Courtship.
encounter. And so then here we are. The servant is telling the whole story to Rebecca's father. Okay, here comes Ellie again. We'll just let her log back on before we go on. Hey, Ellie. Yay. Yay.
Having really screwy computer problems.
It was
Sorry to
my
interrupt.
story last week, as you know. Yeah. You're at home?
Yes, yep,
Hey, where in the world are the Tuppers? Bethesda. Yay.
for once.
So we've just been trying to locate where Abraham and Isaac are at this point in the story. And I'll just go back. I think you were briefly on when I was showing this map. The last we've seen Abraham, he's up in Hebron burying Sarah, so in the land of Canaan. And then the text tells us that when Isaac comes out to meet Rebekah, he comes out of Lahai Roy, which is way down here. So we were saying it doesn't seem likely that Isaac is still hanging out with his father. Not a big surprise why that would be the case. But then John also reminded us that Bir Lahai Roy is the place where Hagar and Ishmael encounter the angel of the Lord, encounter God, when they are, going, when they've been banished by Sarah, into the wilderness. So is that a coincidence? Maybe, maybe not. So we're speculating about, what it might imply one way or the other. Is he hanging out with Ishmael? Maybe he is. But so then we were trying to just figure out where the tent of Sarah is. And because we know that at the end of this chapter, which we did manage to read last week before my Wi-Fi finally just lost its mind entirely, that we were talking about how it was significant that Isaac brought Rebekah into Sarah's tent. And John asked the great question, where is Sarah's tent? And that's what I'm trying to figure out. Does anyone have any ideas based on this?
He'd come from Bir Lahai Roy and was settled in the Negev. Is that where that is? I mean, I see
Potential.
the map again. But
Yeah.
is Bir Lahai Roy in the Negev?
Let's see. It's down in the wilderness of Param. This is the desert of Shin or Zin that gets talked about in Hebrew scripture a lot. Is that the same as the Negev? Oops, sorry. I should know this, and I apologize that I don't. I try to anticipate questions.
That is the Negev down there, the
That-
desert just below that.
That's okay. Good. Thank
Yeah.
you. All right.
But where does Isaac wind up? Does he wind up back in Hebron? I haven't read
That's
ahead
what I'm
enough.
trying to figure out. Um, I was so focused on where he was at the beginning um, of the story that I didn't really pay attention. Let's see. Well, I was Googling Tent of Sarah location, and apparently there's a store near me called the Tent of Sarah. So I can give you Google Maps.
Good Lord, Marion.
That doesn't help. Uh, oh dear. It's a kosher delivery, grocery with delivery. Um, so,
Thought maybe it was a bridal store.
exactly. That would make sense.
Yes.
Um, let's see. We know where Sarah's tomb is located. It's interesting. I don't know where Sarah's tent is. That I'm just going to concede defeat. So at the end last week, Isaac had come from Bir Lahai Roi and was settled in the Negev. Isaac went out in the evening to walk in the field, and looking up, he saw camels coming. And Rebecca looked up, and when she saw Isaac, you can just imagine if this were in a movie, the music would be swelling. She slipped quickly from the camel and said to the servant, "Who is the man over there walking in the field to meet us?" The servant said, "It is my master." So she took her veil and covered herself. And the servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent. He took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So we don't really know where this is. He's come from Bir Lahai Roi, but if the Negev is south of here, it's not in Hebron. So I don't know. We know that Sarah is, and if that's the case, that would make even more sense why it's significant that Abraham buried Sarah in the north, or north of where they were, in order to have that stakehold there. Long non-answer to the question. Other thoughts about that?
Possible that just for
Maybe it'll be
sentimental-
revealed as we go forward.
Maybe it will. Maybe it will. What were you saying, Nellie?
It just may be that for sentimental reasons, when he separated from Abraham, which we figured he would do, he could have taken his mother's tent and belongings with him.
Except she was still alive at that point, right?
No, I thought she died.
Well, she died, but I believe that he separated. Well, we don't know, right? In my mind, he would have separated from Abraham right after the near sacrifice. But maybe not. Maybe he waited until Sarah died, in which case that theory would make all the sense in the world, Ellie.
I always see Isaac as being fairly young at the time of the potential sacrifice.
Yeah.
Most of the, and that's just from the artwork that shows him as a child.
Yeah. I think traditionally we imagine him that way. But even at that, I could imagine if he's, a young man, 12, 13, and his father tried to kill him, he may go on the lam, but he also may have waited until Sarah died. And again, we don't know, there's so much we don't know from the Genesis text itself. And we looked at that midrash a few weeks ago about how Sarah reacted when she found out what Abraham had nearly done. But the text doesn't, this text, the scriptural text doesn't tell us that. So there are lots of gaps that we're left to fill in. So really what we're engaging in right now is midrash, right? Trying to make sense of the details that are not clear in the Bible.
A nomadic people, as the tribe grew larger, would have to split.
Exactly. So last week we talked a little bit about Isaac bringing Rebekah into Sarah's tent and the significance of that. And I had shared with you, let's see if I can find it. I had it queued up. Sorry, you don't need to see all that. That's not very interesting. Sorry, I don't know where it went. Well, I apologize. Let's not do that. I had the altar queued up, but I can't get it at the moment. But I sent you after last week's session a note from Altar talking about the significance of Sarah's tent and that language. Does anyone remember what Altar said? If I stop sharing, I can find it without subjecting you to my messy screen. Does anyone remember? I'll pull it up. Okay, here we go. Let me share again. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm.
All right. Rebecca fills the emotional gap left by Sarah's death. Let's close that. As the end of the verse indicates. And with the first matriarch deceased, Rebecca also takes up the role of matriarch in the family. It's thus exactly right that he should bring her into his mother's tent. And then at the beginning of 25, we'll see the rest of the story about Abraham. We get this idea of the matrilinear connection, right?
Mhm.
That it's now we've got a new matriarch.
Mhm.
Abraham is not discussed here, whether he's still living or not. He's not part of this part of the story. There's no more direct connection between Isaac and Abraham, which I think is very significant. At the human level, of course not, right? But also when we think about the faithfulness of God in interceding and preventing Abraham from taking his son's life. It's like Isaac rather, is now in this protected bubble, at least for the moment, where he has no more connection with Abraham. And it's severed, and it's all about Sarah. And so then Rebecca, as the new Sarah, watch out, because Rebecca turns out to be a piece of work too. Any other thoughts about this? Did you want to go back and look at anything else from 24 before we move on?
I'm just struck on because the servant, has gone to Iraq or whatever, has come back and stumbles on Isaac, although he was sent by Abraham and with a
Hmm.
commission from Abraham. But it's the Bible. I
Yep.
guess it's the way it is.
I like that. That's the Bible. Yep. There it is. There it is. Um,
I am kind of constantly, I don't want to say offended, but, by the fact that things are left out or so contradictory. But I can understand, a nomadic people wandering around, they would know, where one another were just so they could stay out of each other's way.
Hmm.
And as I look at chapter 25, Abraham, he's old, but he's not dead.
Well, hold on.
Yeah, I'm definitely not dead.
Hold on to that. We're almost there. Yeah. Anything else about this? So we've got this significant well scene, which we've talked about at length about the symbolism of the well. One commentator I was reading this week said that she was struck by verse 67. Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent. He took Rebekah, so that obviously has a sexual connotation, and she became his wife, and he loved her. And the idea of a husband loving his wife, we haven't seen too much of thus far. And I hadn't really thought about that, but it did get my attention, just that one reference to him loving her. Like, okay.
What is the Hebrew word they used?
I was just going to show you. Come on. There's got to be a better way than this. All right, let me reboot that. You all are very, very patient. I appreciate
It's a
it.
Christian virtue.
Let's see, way down here.
Does Louise back that up?
I didn't say I had it. I just said it is.
Oh, all right. Well, all right. While the interlinear is deciding to reboot, here we go. Let's try it this time. It's just very slow today. Okay.
Isaac certainly didn't get a good example from his father.
No, he didn't. He
Mhm.
certainly did not.
Well, the role of his father was to be, was back then it was to do what God said. Wasn't to be a good family man or,
Well, that was his interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
I constantly bounce back and forth between trying to make sense of these in, sort of reasonable, rational human terms. And what did the people really want to say when they were writing this? And it's
Right.
yeah.
And
To
remember,
me,
there's a bit of, hagiography here because Abraham is so esteemed in the history of Judaism, right? And so it's not so much bringing out all of his character traits as talking about, his role. What does he represent? But even at that, imperfect, certainly, as we keep saying, pimping out his wife, not once, but twice at least that we know about.
and if he had faith in God's promise, that seems to have been his major virtue. Why did he feel the need?
Well, and it's so interesting, right? Because we talk all the time about the faith of Abraham, but yeah, I mean, he was motivated because God promised him he was going to get something. It was a transactional thing. So I sometimes question, just how faithful, and this may sound totally heretical to say this, but just how faithful is Abraham? Does he do everything out of faith, or is it, because he's been promised something? That's very human, right? Of course.
Well, your idea of God back then was the vending machine God.
Right.
The
Exactly.
covenants that, we see being drawn up are the same form as, earthly kings would have covenants with one another.
Well, exactly. And it's exactly my point, Fred, so that we lift Abraham up as though he's somehow above that, but not so much, right? He is a product of his time, of his culture. And that's, we can't expect more than that. But I guess I'm just trying to contextualize him and say, he's not this exemplar of perfect faith that we sometimes think of him to be. I certainly was brought up, in my CCD classes, I was brought up to believe that Abraham was blindly faithful and just perfect. But of course, I wasn't actually allowed to read the Bible back then. So once I started to read the Bible, I was like, oh, so anyway,
Catholics were
apologies
not
if
in
I
favor of
offended
reading the
anybody.
Bible.
That's what well, right. That's having been raised Catholic. That's my point. Exactly. Is that I was told these things, but it wasn't until I started to read the text for myself that I began to have questions, we'll say. Exactly. Okay, so back to the question of what it means for Isaac to love Rebecca. There are lots of different possible nuances. Human love for another, sort of what we would expect. Human appetite, I'll leave that alone. Human love for or to God. It could be active being a friend. So So this one word encompasses various kinds of love. In Greek, we know that there are separate words for different kinds of love, which is so much more helpful than either the Hebrew or English, which is just love and it doesn't have that nuance. But so it's interesting. Let's just see when we look at its usages. Love is used 13 times in Genesis. But this is only the second time that word shows up, and the first time was talking about the love between Abraham and Isaac. So the idea of a man loving his wife, this is the first time we've seen it here at Genesis 24. Again, I don't want to put too much pressure on it, but when I read that commentary, I thought, oh, that is interesting, because we don't ever hear about Abraham loving Sarah. He's got a funny way of showing it if he does. So it's just interesting that seeps into the text that gets canonized, right? That Isaac loves Rebecca. All right, shall we move forward?
Wow.
Okay. Would someone like to read these first two paragraphs for us? And just bearing in mind, there are a bunch of names here, just be bold. No one's going to know otherwise if you mispronounce it.
Sure, I'll go ahead and give it.
All right, the brave Fred. Go for it.
And how old is Abraham at this point?
175 years.
Abraham again took a wife, and her name was Keturah, and she bore him Zimram, Jokshan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shuah. Jokshan begot Sheba and Dedam, and the sons of Dedam were Asherim, Ledashim, and Limonium. Like drugs.
Something like that.
And the sons of Midian were Ephah, Epher, Hanok, Abidah, and Eldaha. All these were children of Keturah. Abraham gave all that he had to Isaac, but Abraham gave gifts to the sons of the concubines which Abraham had, while he was still living. He sent them eastward, away from Isaac his son, to the country of the east.
Can you do through verse 11?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
This is just where mine broke paragraphs.
Okay.
This is the sum of the years of Abraham's life, which he lived, 175 years. Then Abraham breathed his last and died in a good old age, an old man full of years, and was gathered to his people. And his sons, Isaac and Ishmael, buried him in the cave of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite, the field which Abraham purchased from the sons of Heth. There Abraham was buried, and Sarah his wife. And it came to pass after the death of Abraham that God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac dwelt at Beer Lahai Roy.
Okay. So I think it's altar. Thank you so much, Fred. You definitely get a prize for all those names.
Abraham seems to be the Rupert Murdoch of his generation.
Excellent. I love it. So I think it's Alter who says, it's unclear. So did this little episode, this section, should it really come between chapter 23 and 24? That would make more sense, because then we get Isaac down at Beer Lahai Roy. Or is this after all that and Isaac goes back down there? It's unclear. But what's noticeable here for you? What strikes you? Aside from the fact that Abraham is clearly very fertile.
Well, Ishmael and Isaac have gotten together to bury their father.
Yeah.
So obviously they did connect somewhere in this geographically.
We just don't know when, right? Yeah. Anything else that you notice?
The rest, I mean, Abraham or Isaac and Ishmael do okay out of this, but
Mhm.
he said he took a wife of Keturah,
Mm-hmm.
but it sounds more like she was a concubine when they come to dividing up the property.
Hmm. Yeah, I was wondering about that too. I mean, was she a wife or a concubine? And then it's the sons of his concubines.
Yes, thank you. Plural.
I mean, okay, he was supposed to be sire of myriads, and he just got a pretty late start at it,
Yeah,
making up for lost
Yeah,
time.
but once he started,
exactly. Exactly. But once again, Isaac is the privileged one, right? Um, and everybody else gets this, Starbucks gift card. And, um, you know, not so sure about that. And they're banished. They're sent away. Um,
And
that
Ishmael
doesn't
gets
bother me.
nothing.
I think you'd have to be sent away in if you're a nomadic tribe. There's
right,
only
but
so much carrying capacity of of the land.
right, but
Well,
them away from his son Isaac. That's the phrase that
Mm,
speaks to me.
mm.
It's like, separating the herd a little bit. And
well, I mean, obviously he prioritized Sarah because that's who he was buried next to. Even though he has a new wife, it's not like they've found a plot together, you know?
Mhm.
And
And
so
she's still alive.
prioritizing, it
Right, Keturah
says,
is still alive. Yep.
but I mean, right. But I mean, if you remarried, I don't know how you would feel if your husband said, "I want to go be buried with my ex-wife or my former, I don't know."
First wife. That's
So,
kind of
so first wife. So he obviously prioritizes Sarah, and then in that case prioritizes his firstborn
Beautiful. Or
with
second
this
born.
second born.
Yeah.
True, true.
Poor Ishmael just always gets cut out of the story.
But his firstborn was Sarah.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
only.
Only.
Yeah. And so now Abraham also is buried in Canaan. So, there is talk about that foothold, that stake that's been put down. Both Sarah and Abraham are buried there. Um, so
So
again,
Isaac now owns that land too.
because everything he has been given to everything Abraham has been given to Isaac. Exactly. And Isaac doesn't settle up there. He settles at Bir Lahai Roy.
Right.
So again, it's interesting to me. Not
How
any,
far apart are those places?
good question.
It looks pretty, like quite a hike.
Yeah, yeah. Certainly at that time it would have been. Yeah, because here's Jerusalem, way up here, Dead Sea. That's a significant stretch.
Mm.
And there's Rehoboth where you just were, Kim.
Exactly. Ta-da!
Exactly. I saw that.
No beach though, no beach.
Dunstan.
Desert only, right?
Exactly. Whoops, sorry. Um, all right, anything else about the death of Abraham that strikes you or all of his other children? One, two, three, four, five, six other children, and then lots of grandkids.
All from the same woman, so that must have taken a while. There's another
Yeah.
16.
Perhaps he had
Yeah.
quintuplets and
Okay, according to Google, the Dead Sea is 47 miles long.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that's about 100 miles. That's a long way.
That's a long way.
In verse 11, after the death of Abraham, God blessed his son Isaac. They don't specify how.
And I wonder if that's meant to refer to Rebecca. Because again, we don't, this is oddly placed chronologically. So is this like a flashback? Meanwhile, back in Haran, or Hebron rather. Um, so, that could be how Isaac is blessed. Certainly by Mary and Rebecca, that would be considered a blessing. All right, should we look at Ishmael's descendants?
Oh boy, more names.
Who feels up to it?
I'll try it.
All right, Ellie.
Here we go. These are the descendants of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's slave, bore to Abraham. These are the names of the sons of Ishmael, named in the order of their birth. Nebaioth, the firstborn of Ishmael, and Kedar, Adbeel, Mibsam, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadad, Tema, Jetur, Naphish, and Kedemah. These are the sons of Ishmael, and these are their names by their villages and by their encampments, 12 princes according to their tribes. This is the length of the life of Ishmael, 137 years. He breathed his last and died and was gathered to his people. They settled from Havilah to Shur, which is opposite Egypt in the direction of Assyria. He settled down alongside all his people.
Thank you. Let's just see what the footnote says. He fell down in opposition to all his people. Interesting.
Huh.
Does anyone have any good footnotes in their study Bible about that? That's verse
No,
18.
no.
Let's see what I've got. My note says it could be interpreted as made raids against all his people.
That's different than alongside.
Exactly. Again, it's so interesting how translation can just change the whole nuance of the story.
Oh, and Alter's got reads very differently. Here it says they settled from Havilah to Shur, which faces, and he says, and they ranged from Havilah to Shur, which faces Egypt, until you come to Ashur. In defiance of all his brothers, he went down.
Ah, that makes more sense. That's kind of like in opposition to. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
mine says he died in the presence of all his brethren.
Fascinating. Well, and remember that Hebrew is a really ambiguous language, certainly biblical Hebrew, right? Before there are vowel pointings, oftentimes it's very hard to know how to interpret just the consonants when they're put together because they could mean different things depending on what the vowels are meant to be. So, and here's a great example of that because those are wildly different interpretations. Out of curiosity, let's just see what the interlinear says. Not interested, thank you. Let's see. Well, that's just a preposition. In the face. Okay, so the question is, does it mean in the face of, in other words, in front of, or does it mean against the face of? That's the difference right there. So is it with or against? Basically is the question. And it's not clear. Oh, sorry. Okay.
You don't do that.
All right. Now I've lost that. All right, Thank you for your patience as I do. Genesis 25. No matter how I cue things up, somehow they get messed up. Okay. So we don't quite know. And remember when we were looking at the story or the prediction about Ishmael, he shall be a wild ass of a man with his hand against everyone and everyone's hand against him, and he shall live at odds with all of his kin. So that kind of would indicate that it is against or in defiance of his family. Probably not alongside. Okay. Shall we read about Esau and Jacob? Who would like to read the birth narrative about these twins, these famous twins?
I can read it.
Thank you, Kim.
Do I start at 19?
Yes, please.
Okay. These are the descendants of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, the Armenian of Paddan Aram, sister of Laban, Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his prayer, and his wife Rebekah conceived. The children struggled together within her, and she said, "If it is to be this way, why do I live?" She went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, the elder shall serve the younger." When her time to give birth was at hand, there were twins in her womb. The first came out red, all his body like a hairy mantle, so they named him Esau. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand gripping Esau's heel, so he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man living in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he was fond of game, but Rebekah loved Jacob.
Thank you. What strikes you here? This is probably a fairly familiar bit of text.
I was just thinking about gripping the heel. Like, what is the significance of that?
Yeah. What is
Pulling him down? I don't.
Pulling him down, pulling him back so he can get ahead, perhaps.
Having control.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping him out of harm's way.
Mm.
It looks like the struggle is just continuing on the way out.
Yeah.
And continues.
This supports my long-held theory, certainly since I had children, that the way people come into the world either reflects or predicts the way they're going to live their lives. And it's kind of been true for all three of my boys. I won't bore you with it, but this is just interesting because here they're born, struggling with each other. And as we know, as the story unfolds, that definitely continues.
Well, I guess they almost are both born together, even though
Yeah.
Esau is first.
Mm.
Jacob is right. It's not like you would deliver a twin, then in a couple minutes go by and deliver the next one. That the question of birthright, he can at least, hey, I was there too at the same time, holding on.
Yeah, that's the key, the holding on. Maybe that's why they were born so quickly together because,
But what's this about the elder serving the younger if there's no difference between them?
Well, Esau technically is a little bit older. Um, they're not poor Rebecca if they were literally born at the same time.
Right.
Yeah, I just don't want to go there. So Esau is a little bit older, but that image of Jacob grabbing onto his heel, whether it's literally grabbing onto his heel or coming out immediately after and always, striving to overcome his older brother. I mean, it could be literal, it's certainly metaphorical as well. Um, just this strident competition between the two. So Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, and Isaac loves him. He was Isaac's favorite, but Rebecca loved Jacob. Dun 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 dun. Shall we finish this chapter?
Sure.
All right, who would
Yeah.
like to read about Esau selling his birthright?
I will.
Thank you, John.
Okay. Once when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was famished. Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stuff, for I am famished." Therefore, he was called Edom. Jacob said, "First, sell me your birthright." Esau said, "I'm about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?" Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went away. Thus Esau despised his birthright.
Thank you.
Well, that's complex.
Think about the family psychology here. Boy, did they need some therapy. So it's interesting, Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stuff, for I am famished." Therefore, he was called Edom, which means red. But we know that when he was born, he came out red. And so they named him Esau. Um, so this could be one of those textual hiccups or seams where these are two different, remember, there are different strands of tradition that get woven together in these stories. So perhaps these are two different explanations for why Esau is called red or called Edom. And then what do you make about this birthright situation?
Makes no sense. You're born first, you're born first. You can't change that.
But
Well,
you
but
can't sign
if
over
he's
your
a,
rights. Oh, go ahead, John. Sorry.
I'm saying, although if Esau is a hunter and a man of the woods or whatever, he doesn't care that much. I mean, the birthright is you get the tents and all the stuff there, and he didn't seem to hold that very highly that he wants to be the patriarch settled down.
Excellent.
And
Excellent.
he'd much rather not be the one who's responsible for running things. But Jacob's a pretty crafty guy.
He sure is.
I
He's
mean,
been grabbing that man's heel since they were born, and he's finally got him.
And he made him swear too. He didn't just say, "Yeah, go ahead." I mean, no, you swear first before I.
Exactly.
Give you something to eat.
Exactly. Nice brother, right?
Mhm.
And then here we see, if we think about, we've been talking about Sarah's tomb, and then which also becomes Abraham's tomb, and how that's getting the right to a plot of land in Canaan. And then this whole concept of birthright starts entering the story because we haven't seen that before, right? An inheritance. And you can start to see, and we all know this from our own families, how having property, having an inheritance that just can divide people, and how it's not necessarily a good thing. And to John's point, Esau, that's not who he is. He's just like, I'm just going to go out and I'm going to go hunting, and that's how I'm going to live my life. And Jacob wants his. And remember, Rebecca loves Jacob. So stay tuned as the soap opera unfolds next time. I mean, I find this whole part of the story just fascinating because thousands of years later, we have not changed. It's still, I mean, the details may be different, but I mean, humans are humans, and it's just really interesting to me.
What is the Hebrew word they used for despised?
Yeah.
Let's see, that's verse 34. Okay, let's see. Let me go back. I'll do this.
Alter uses spurned.
Let's see what the Hebrew is. Baza, despise, hold in contempt, disdain, regard with contempt.
But don't you think it sounds like two teenage boys being like, one has a pizza and one wants it, and he's like, give me your favorite baseball card for this. And they're like, yeah. Okay. Because I just
give me
want the
that
pizza
pizza.
at this moment in time. It's not like you really mean that you're going to give away your favorite baseball. You know what I mean? It's like, how much do you want it? Will you give me your, it just reminds me of that dynamic of kids.
But in this case, the stakes are a bit higher.
Yeah.
So Esau's about to lose more than just a baseball card.
Yeah.
Sadly for him.
Is he? I mean, inheritance is still at the whim of the patriarch.
Mhm.
But
And
Jacob's, but
it's not until
Isaac's
he
the
gets
patriarch.
Isaac's blessing that he really
All right,
firms up the deal.
don't give it away.
Yeah,
Not everyone
don't
knows the whole story, so hang on. Next week we'll get to that.
Well, I was going to, but on that line, maybe this is stuck in here to soften the rest of the story.
Could well be. Very could well be. Yeah.
Well,
You
Because
see, today they would say the contract is invalid because he was starving and therefore could not consent
that's right.
to anything.
That's right.
under duress.
Exactly.
Exactly, Jackie.
It was forced.
Yes.
Any other last thoughts about Rebecca and Isaac and Esau and Jacob, or Abraham and Sarah while we're at it?
Typical
I think-
families, squabbles.
Typical families. Exactly. Exactly. When I used to teach this in seventh grade at St. Andrews, Kim, the kids just loved it because they could relate to it, especially kids who had siblings. It's like, oh yeah,
Siblings
I get
bickering.
this. Kelly, stop.
Exactly.
All right, these two are losing their minds over the squirrel again, so I'm going to go.
Thank you, Patty.
It was wonderful to see you all, and we'll pick up next time as the saga of Esau and Jacob unfolds further.
Thank you, Patty.
Okay, thanks,
Thank
Patty.
you.
Thank you all.
Enjoyed it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.